Today we're going to talk a little bit about Epimediums, which are known for being a really great plant for shade. Now, if you read a lot of the literature, they're really touted for dry shade. They're actually not the best in dry shade. They're tolerant if you're far enough north, but when you get down into the southern states, they're not good in dry shade or not extremely dry shade. Average shade, that's fine. What they really like, typically Epimediums in the wild, the majority of them grow in or near waterfalls. So they actually are a plant that like moisture, but they like really good drainage. So if you go back, say, 20 years ago, this is what you would see with most Epimediums. Epimediums started out with some species that had been cultivated for many years in Japan. Epimedium diphyllum, Epimedium setosum, grandiflorum, and the hybrid Epimedium youngianum. And while they were very interesting, they weren't something that you would see from 10 feet away and run to. They just weren't that showy. The flowers for many of them were down in the foliage, at least after that second flush of foliage came out in the spring. Most of the early ones were also deciduous. So they would die completely in the wintertime, which makes them a little bit more hardy going into zone 4, some of them. But just to give you an idea of what the colors are, you range based on species. Most of the ones we talked about are pink or white or lavender. And then you get to things like Epimedium davidi. It's another dwarf species. That one from China is where you start bringing in some of the yellow. Epimediums are either clumpers or runners. Most of what we're looking at here is a clumping epimedium. These never do spread. The clump gets a little larger each year. So if we looked at a clump here that probably has not been divided in, say, 5 years. So it's now 2 foot, a little over 2 foot across. Now, if you want to divide Epimediums, that's best done after they finish flowering, and you can divide them all through the summertime. For most people, we recommend taking a fairly good-sized clump, the size of your fist or larger, and you can easily move those. If you want to really start propagating, then you need to actually dig them out of the ground, shake the dirt off, and get a set of clippers with very thin blades, and you can cut them into very small pieces, but certainly not something you want to recommend for most homeowners. We have our beds where we do our trialing of Epimediums raised, so that way we get a good vantage point of what the plant looks like. Epimediums, as I mentioned, because they occur in waterfalls, they really look great if you have a raised area, a cliff, where they can hang off and you can look in them, because again, many of them, the flowers aren't particularly high above the foliage. This row is all Epimediums that we have introduced here at Plant Delights and Juniper level. So we started out, our initial work was with the grandiflorums that we started out earlier, and did some more unusual things. This is our mini pearl with very small flowers, and this came out of plants like Epimedium stellulatum, which has very tiny leaves. We've since moved into more of the larger flowered, as many of the Epimediums that have come along in the last 20 years are the work of Darrell Probst, who was an Epimedium breeder up in Massachusetts. He brought in a lot of new species, which gave us much larger flowers and much more floriferous plants. And that's what resulted in things like our stoplights here. These are plants that you actually can see from 10 feet away, and you say, wow, that's an incredible show. We're working on large plants, working on small plants. This is one we're looking at for future generations. This is where we do all our trialing. We currently have just over 340 different kinds of Epimediums, different varieties and species. And so we are able to grow them in this area in one space. So when we have a new seedling, we immediately can compare it to everything else that's out there. And we realize, all right, this is really great, or this is something that looks like it, or it's not as good as something already on the market. One of our early introductions
is still very popular is this little dwarf ground cover. This is one called Sunny and Share, because you can, bright yellow, and you can share it because it does spread. It's not vigorous like some of the running epimediums that really can push other plants out. This is a much better behaved plant. And this for us will bloom for 3+ months. It's a very, very long blooming time. While many of the earlier grandiflorums, you're looking at probably 4 weeks, depending on your weather. If it gets very hot, they'll go ahead and go down early. But we like these that we're selecting now for longer bloom times. Here's another real showpiece. This is one of our introductions called Songbirds. You can again see how the incredible floral show is so much different than what we had 20 years ago. The Epimediums have just come so amazingly far since then. Another of our really outstanding ones is this one called Rise and Shine. It's starting to go over now, so it's one of the earliest ones to come into flower, where you see things like this that have not just barely begun to open. This is Epimedium Wushanense supermodel for these beautiful mottled leaves, and you see that has a spike almost 30 inches. So we've gone from very small ones to now things that are much larger and make much more of an impact in the garden. These are some new things we're working on. Always interested in the leaf mottling. This is one we've named Cinnamon Coconut. It has not been introduced yet, but beautiful purple, almost brown flowers and the large white flowers. This is Super Striper. It's another one that's coming soon. This is a really lovely plant with purple and white. This typically comes from one called Epimedium accuminatum, which typically is very low, and it's sort of hard to see the flowers. And so this one we've been able to breed to get the flowers much taller and really makes much more of a show. We're always working on different colors. This is the Wushanense hybrid that has beautiful flowers that are sort of a peachy orange and white, which is a very different color in Epimediums. So this one is certainly in the works for getting propagated as well. We're also working with other breeders to evaluate their stuff, and there's a very high bar now, so it really is difficult to find something that's better than what's already out there. But we're working with our friend Hans Hansen, who's a breeder up at Walters Gardens. He's got some amazing new plants coming out. This is one we've got on trial. We're really liking this. This is Red Hot. It's a very different color, and it's got the flowers up very high. One of my favorites is this plant, and this is still a few years away. This is Epimedium spider monkeys. It's really got an incredibly long spike that holds very high in the air, and this thing just flowers literally for weeks and weeks and weeks. I mean, probably 10 to 12 weeks, maybe longer, and you see it's got a lot of that Epimedium Wushanense blood. So it's really an exciting time to be growing Epimediums, and just again, having seen where we were 20 years ago to where we are now, it's just incredibly exciting. Let's walk and take a look at some of those spreading ones now. This is where we trial a lot of our spreading Epimediums, because again, if you're not careful, they'll spread into other things. And these are much more aggressive than anything we looked at earlier. So these are Epimedium versicolor. This is a beautiful ground cover, and I love these because the foliage comes out just beautiful brown and contrasts real nice with the flowers. Epimedium Pinnatum colchicum, just getting ready to flower, and these, again, the leaves are just incredible. They come out with this beautiful green veining on a red background. And more Epimedium versicolor. Epimedium rubrum, a plant many people grow. Beautiful leaves emerge with beautiful bright red edges. None of these have the show power of what we looked at earlier with the clumping ones with the very large flowers. But if you're looking for just a ground cover, beautiful, attractive things, it's a great ground cover.
This is one of the typical Epimedium youngianum, which is a naturally occurring hybrid. This is what they look like. This is one called Pink Star in the garden. So this is this clump has been in since 2006. So that is an 18-year-old clump, just to give you an idea of the size. So they get to a nice size and then they stop unless you have a running one. Two of the best of the last decade or so has been one. This is Amber Queen. This is a hybrid from the UK that's absolutely amazing, as you can see. Now, in terms of light and shade, while they grow well in shade, they don't flower well in deep shade. So light open shade is the best. Here we've got one that gets 3 hours to 4 hours of sun a day. And as long as you can keep some moisture on it, you will get a much better flower show. So it has that opportunity for expanding the zone that they can grow. Another fabulous one that we love is one of the all-time best. This is one of Del Prope's introduction. This is Pink Champagne, which is absolutely an amazing plant. Great foliage, great form, great flowers. It's hard to find a fault with that. Pretty incredible plant. One of the species that's been used in breeding to give you a lot more flowers is Epimedium stellatum. Stellatum is a Chinese species, and while the flowers are small, it literally has just massive numbers. And things like this, not only is it great in its own right in the garden and one of the absolute earliest of the species, but like I mentioned, the breeding potential of this is pretty incredible. There's just so many new species. They're really incredible. Here we're parked beside Epimedium franchetti, another one that comes out with beautiful bronzy foliage and yellow flowers. I hope this gives you a little idea of what the potential in your garden of Epimediums are for light shade, part sun for a few hours, especially in the morning sun. They're really just incredible plants. And like I say, the bloom time has gone from 4 weeks to, in many cases, 12+ weeks. So it's a really exciting plant, and it's time in the garden.